The sky bled orange as the wagon creaked up the narrow pass, the wheels groaning like something wounded. The girl sat beside her father in silence, her wrists raw from the coarse rope that had once bound them. The mountains loomed ahead, dark and ancient, like teeth waiting to bite. Her belly, though still slight, pressed against the fabric of her dress, a stubborn reminder of what she had done, or perhaps what had been done to her. She didn't look at the man beside her. His silence was sharper than any whip. The wind smelled of pine and ash. Her father, upright and unflinching in his black coat, kept one hand on the reins and the other on the old Bible that never left his side. His voice hadn't risen since they left the settlement that morning, but had spoken in other ways. In the absence of farewell, in the tightening of the rope, in the way he hadn't looked at her face once since she confessed. They crested the ridge as the last light melted into shadows. Below, nestled in a cleft of granite and pine, was a crooked cabin that looked like it had grown out of the mountain itself. Smoke trailed from the chimney, faint and blue. She squinted. A man stood at the tree-lean, unmoving, watching them approach. Her father pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, dusting his coat with brisk, angry hands. She didn't move. He yanked the rope that still looped around her waist. "Get down," he said. His voice cracked like ice underfoot. She stepped off the wagon slowly, her bare feet touching dirt that was colder than expected. The man by the trees waited without a word. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered and still. The kind of stillness that made you think of wolves, not men. Her father strode toward him, the girl trailing behind like a condemned soul. The wind picked up again, tugging her hair into her eyes. "You're the one they said lives up here," her father said. The man nodded once. "You serve under Colonel Maddox." Another nod. "You don't take visitors." Still, the man said nothing. Her father took a breath, stiff and heavy. "I've got something needs keeping." He didn't finish the sentence, just gestured backward without turning his head. Ruin herself. Or let herself be ruined. "I got no use for her now. But you got no one. I figured it's a fair trade." The silence between them deepened. The girl's chest rose and fell, each breath tighter than the last. Her fingernails dug into her palms. At last, the mountain man spoke. His voice was low and dry, like gravel under boot. "And if I say no?" Her father's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Then I leave her anyway." The man's eyes flicked to the girl. She met them, dark, hard eyes that did not blink. She had cried her last tear a week ago. Now, she was only coiled anger and shame. He looked back to the father. "You can go," he said. "You'll take her?" A pause. "Then I'll keep her alive." That seemed to satisfy the preacher. He dropped the rope and turned back to his wagon. He didn't bless her, didn't offer parting words or glances, just climbed up, snapped the reins, and was swallowed by the dusk. She stood alone in the clearing, fists clenched, blood thrumming in her ears. The mountain man did not move toward her. After a moment, he turned and walked toward the cabin. She followed because there was nothing else to do. The cabin was small, but solid. A single window looked out over the valley below, and a rusted horseshoe hung over the door. Inside, it smelled of smoke and pine tar, the heat thick and close. A bearskin lay before the hearth, and a kettle hissed softly over the fire. A rifle rested on hooks above the door. He said nothing as she stepped inside, just lit a second lantern and placed it on a small table by the wall. She stood in the center of the room, unsure whether to sit or speak. "You'll sleep there," he said, gesturing to a narrow cot in the corner. "You'll eat when I do. You don't touch my traps. You don't go past the trees. That's where the land stops being kind." She didn't answer. He didn't wait for one. He turned his back and began stripping bark from a bundle of branches near the hearth. That night, she didn't sleep. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Somewhere far off, an animal screamed, long and high like a soul being peeled from a bone. She lay curled on the cot, the blanket stiff and smelling of old sweat. Her hand went to her stomach, without thinking. He had left a bowl of stew on the table. She hadn't touched it. Hunger twisted inside her like a knife. In the darkness, she heard him breathing, steady, unfazed. She hated him for that. Hated his silence, his stillness, the way he hadn't looked at her like a woman, or a child, or even a human being. Just something left behind, something to be endured. Near dawn, she slipped out the door. The air bit her lungs. The forest stretched wide, indifferent and black. She didn't run. Running would make noise. She just moved, swift and silent, barefoot over pine needles and wet stone. The light hadn't yet broken the horizon when the trees thickened and the trail disappeared. Her feet were bleeding. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She reached a rise, heart pounding, and paused. She didn't know where she was. Behind her, something cracked in the underbrush. She turned. Nothing. Only the sound of the wind in the branches. A bird shrieked overhead. Her legs gave way. She stayed there until the cold crept in through her skin. Later, minutes or hours, she wasn't sure. She heard footsteps behind her, heavy, deliberate. She didn't turn as he crouched beside her and laid a blanket across her shoulders. She flinched. He didn't speak, just rose again and waited. She followed, back at the cabin. He set the fire again and handed her the same bowl of stew. She took it this time, hands trembling. "You try that again," he said softly, "and the coyotes won't leave much to bury." She looked at him, really looked. "Why did you say yes?" she asked. He didn't blink. "Because he was wrong about you." The girl didn't understand what that meant. Not yet, but it was the first thing he'd said that didn't sound like stone. She ate in silence, the fire flickering between them. Outside, dawn finally cracked the sky, light touching the edge of the mountains like a promise it hadn't decided to keep. Winter came fast and without grace. One day the hills were brown and brittle. The next they vanished beneath a white so thick it erased the paths, the trees, even the sky. The girl awoke that morning to silence, true silence. No birds, no wind, just a muffled breath of snow against the walls. The cabin had become its own world, and the outside was something imagined. She'd learned not to speak unless necessary. He didn't ask for conversation, and she had grown tired of pushing words against his stonewall quiet. Still, sometimes she whispered things into the fire when he stepped out, just to feel her voice exist. He always returned with wood, with meat, with snow melting in a copper pot. He moved through the days like a man born to them, slow, deliberate, invisible. She began to notice his hands, scarred and cracked, thick-fingered but careful. When he carved, they moved like memory, not intention. There was rhythm to them. Sometimes she imagined asking him what he used to be before the war, before the cabin, before her father shoved her into his life like a curse. But she didn't ask. Not yet. She watched him one afternoon as he sat on the stoop, sharpening his knife against a stone worn smooth with time. Snowflakes landed in his beard and didn't melt. His eyes tracked the tree line like he expected ghosts. Maybe he did. That evening, she found the old coat. It was hanging on a peg in the back room, moth-bitten but regal, dark blue with brass buttons dulled to green. The shoulder bore a torn insignia, and inside the lining, she found 3 initials stitched in black thread. She ran her fingers over them as if they might speak. Then she slid the coat back into place and left it there. That night, she dreamed of fire. In the dream, the cabin burned. She stood outside, unable to move, the flames licking at the roof like tongues of judgment. Inside, the man sat in his chair as if nothing had changed. The fire didn't touch him. She screamed, but no sound came. She woke in sweat. By midwinter, the creek had frozen over. She ventured down once while he was gone, drawn by the shimmer of ice. It looked solid. She stepped lightly at first, then more confidently. Halfway across, it cracked beneath her, sharp, sudden, a scream from the earth itself. She plunged through. The cold stole her breath in a single gulp. She clawed at the ice, but her fingers slipped. Then his hands, gripped her arms and pulled. He didn't speak as he dragged her up the bank, wrapped her in a fur, and carried her inside. She sat by the fire while he stoked a hire, laid out dry clothes, turned away to give her privacy she hadn't asked for. Her skin burned from the thaw. When she looked up, he was watching her. Not with judgment, not even anger. Just a long, unreadable look. "I thought I could make it," she whispered. He nodded once. "So did I once." Later, after she'd fallen asleep wrapped in pelts, she heard him moving. When she opened her eyes, he was seated near the door, rifle across his lap, eyes never blinking. That was the first night she didn't feel entirely alone. A week passed before she asked, "Did you ever have a family?" He didn't answer at first, just kept carving a strip of pine. She almost gave up when he said, "Wife, boy, before the war." "What happened?" He looked up, the knife pausing in his hand. "They died." The simplicity of it struck harder than a story would have. No details, no sentiment, just law spoken like weather. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded, as if that was all there was to say. And maybe it was. She began reading then, books left on a shelf gathering dust and mice, worn leather bindings, their pages yellowed and thin. She read aloud sometimes, her voice shaky but clear. He never asked her to, but he never left when she did. It became routine. Evenings with firelight, her voice filling the cabin with someone else's words. He would sit at the table, mending gear or carving traps, the light catching in his eyes. One night, after she read the last line of the story, she looked up. "You don't talk much." "I talk when it matters," he said. "And it hasn't mattered?" He didn't smile, but something softened around his eyes. Sometimes silence says more than a man's got words for. The next morning, they found tracks near the trapline. Too big for a fox. Heavy, erratic. A bear, maybe, starved and desperate. He showed her how to read the signs, the way the snow bent, the claw marks on a tree. She listened closely, absorbing his knowledge like heat in winter. She asked to learn the rifle. He hesitated, then handed it to her. Old, worn, balanced. She held it wrong at first. He corrected her with a nod, never touching her. Let her shoot at a stump until her shoulder ached. "You don't have to be afraid," he said afterward. "I'm not afraid," she said, but it wasn't true. "You're angry," he said. "There's a difference." She turned that over in her head for days. That night, a storm rolled in heavy, snow slashing sideways across the cabin walls. Inside, the fire flared. She stood near it, hands stretched toward the warmth, staring into the flames. "He left me," she said suddenly, "the one who got me with child. Said he'd marry me, then disappeared. My father said it was my fault, that I seduced him, that I'd brought shame." The man didn't move, just watched the fire alongside her. He said I was sin. "You're not," he said. She believed him. Not completely, but enough to stay by the fire instead of walking into the storm. She lay in bed that night thinking of the boy, of the promises he made with sugar on his tongue. She didn't even remember the color of his eyes anymore. But she remembered the way her father had looked at her, like a dog that had turned mean. The next day, she watched him skin a rabbit. Precise, efficient. She thought of the way he never raised his voice, never touched her, never asked for anything. That evening, she went to the back room and took the coat from the peg. She wore for a while, alone, arms wrapped around her belly. It smelled like pine and smoke and something older than memory. When she came back to the fire, he looked up and saw her in it. He didn't say anything, but he nodded, and in that small gesture, something broke loose inside her that she hadn't realized was frozen. Spring arrived slowly, peeling winter from the earth like old skin. The snow melted in veins down the hillsides, bearing dark soil and broken branches. The creek ran free again, louder than memory, swollen with melt and motion. She stood at the edge of it one morning, her boots damp with dew, her breath rising in soft plumes. In her hands was a rifle he had given her, newly oiled, the stock carved with delicate roses that hadn't bloomed yet. She had begun to feel the child move. Not every day, but enough to remind her. A twist in her gut, a flutter like wind stirring ash. It didn't frighten her. Not anymore. He watched her train quietly, correcting her only when needed. She took to it fast, steadier than he expected. Though he never said so aloud, she didn't need the praise. What she needed was a feeling in her chest when the bullet hit dead center, a sharp echo of control in a world that had stolen every choice from her. It was 3 weeks after the thaw when the rider came. She saw him first. Far off, black coat against green hills, moving with that deliberate pace that meant trouble. The mountain man stepped outside without a word, rifle slung, eyes narrowed. She followed him. The rider dismounted slowly, dust rising around his boots. His hat shadowed his face, but when he looked up, there was something slick and amused in his expression. "You the one tookin' the girl?" he asked. The mountain man didn't answer. He didn't have to. The rider pulled a folded paper from his coat, held it up. "Got myself a notice. Says a preacher down south's got a daughter gone missing. Says she's carrying stolen silver and witchcraft in her belly." The girl went cold, her legs rooted to the ground. "She's not missing," the mountain man said. "She was left." "Still," the rider grinned, "there's a bounty, and bounty's bounty." The girl stepped forward, voice sharp. "There was no theft. He just didn't want me anymore." "That's not how the law reads," the rider replied. "And the law is what pays." What followed happened fast and without warning. The rider reached for her, a motion too familiar, fingers grasping as if she were still something to be taken. The mountain man moved quicker. A hard crack split the air as his rifle, but met the man's face. Blood arced into the dirt. The rider stumbled, drew steel, but he never got to raise it. The mountain man tackled him into mud, fists striking like stone. The girl watched, frozen, until the rider stopped moving. Breathing, yes. Conscious, no. The silence afterward felt too wide. The mountain man stood, chest heaving, hands red. "He'll come back," he said, "or send someone meaner." She stared down at the man crumpled in the grass. He didn't look dangerous anymore, just dirty and small. "We can't leave him here," she whispered. He looked at her, brows drawn. "You want me to finish it?" "No," she said. "We'll bury him." That night, they dug beneath a cottonwood tree. The soil was wet and stubborn, the roots tangled like old secrets. She dug until her arms ached, until her fingernails split. When the hole was done, she didn't cry. She just stood there, staring down at the body, the paper still clutched in his coat. She took it, opened it. Her face looked back at her, drawn in ink, lips thin, eyes too wide. The words beneath accused her of theft, manipulation, seduction, witchery. "Is this what I am?" she asked. He took the paper from her, folded it, and threw it into the fire. "No," he said. Later, as the embers glowed, he told her everything. He spoke of the war, of how he'd scouted the land for men who didn't know it, how he'd helped burn down villages that weren't even enemies, just in the way. He told her of a woman he'd loved who taught him the language of the trees, who gave him a child and a chance at peace. He told her the night they died, lynched by both sides, punished for loving across a line that no one wanted to see crossed. He didn't cry. She did. "I buried them here," he said. "Not far from where we buried that man." She didn't speak for a long time. "You hate me now?" he asked. "I hated you the day I arrived," she said. "Now I just understand." She walked to the fire and sat beside it. He stayed standing, unsure if he was allowed to follow. "You should have let me die in that creek," she said. "You didn't want to die. I didn't want to live like this. But you are." The wind howled outside, tugging at the eaves like a desperate thing. She pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders and stared at the flames. "You don't owe me anything," he said. She turned to him then, eyes sharp. "Neither do you." They buried the bounty hunter with no name. She carved a small mark into the tree above him, not for his sake, but to remember what he meant. The past had a long reach. Later that week, he found her by the river, carving her initials into a piece of pine. She was crying and didn't wipe the tears away. "This land is full of bones," she said. "I figured mine would be here, too." He knelt beside her, silent. After a time, he took out his knife and helped her carve. When they were done, she leaned her head against his shoulder, just for a breath. "Will they keep coming?" she asked. "They might. Then we build something stronger." She stood and walked back toward the cabin. Behind her, he stared at the carved pine, the sun low and gold behind the hills. He finally told her his name that night, only once, and she said it back softly, like it was fragile and needed care. The next day, he began carving a new rifle stock for her. He etched roses into the wood. Not blooming, not yet, just buds. When she asked why, he said, "Because you're still growing." She touched her belly, felt a faint stir within. The child hadn't yet arrived, but the world was already beginning to change. The rain came first, hard, wind-driven sheets that rattled the cabin walls and swept down from the ridges like judgment. She stood at the window, watching the clouds roll in dark and swollen, her fingertips resting lightly against her belly. The child shifted within, restless, like it too could sense what was coming. Behind her, he cleaned his rifle slowly, deliberately, the same way he did everything that mattered. Neither of them spoke. Just after noon, the sound of hooves broke through the storm, distant but sure, not the tentative clop of a traveler. This was a march. She looked at him. He didn't need to say a word. She slipped on her boots, pulled the rifle from above the door, and stepped outside. The rain plastered her hair to her face. Lightning licked the horizon. Down the slope, 6 riders emerged from the trees, their coats slick with water, their hats low. Her father rode at the front. His presence alone dried her throat. He hadn't aged, only hardened, eyes sharp beneath the brim, lips a tight line of contempt. In the wagon behind him was a coffin, polished and obscene. It gleamed like an accusation. He dismounted without ceremony and stepped forward. "You will come with us," he said. "No," she replied. "You've had your rebellion. It ends now." The others fanned out behind him. Deputies, maybe, or just hired men with mouths full of scripture and guns full of cowardice. One held a folded paper. Another bore a rope. It was all dress in legal skin, but she saw the rot beneath. The mountain man stepped beside her, rifle ready, feet planted. "She's not going," he said. Her father's eyes slid to him like ice across glass. "You have no claim." "I'm not claiming her," he said. "She chose to stay. She's my daughter." "No," she said. "I was." "Then you sold me." His face twisted, but not with guilt, with fury. "I gave you a chance to cleanse yourself. I gave you to penance. And you took that and turned it into sin. You gave me away like I was already dead. You are dead. In the eyes of God, in the eyes of this town. I'm more alive than I ever was under your roof." A man on horseback shifted, hand resting near his holster. The mountain man's rifle rose an inch. The air turned electric, tighter than a wire strung between storms. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. "Last chance," her father said. "We'll take you back with dignity, or drag you behind the cart." She stepped forward, slow and sure. The rifle was in her hands, not raised, but ready. "I buried the girl you raised," she said. "She's gone. What's standing here now? She survived you. She survived shame. She survived silence. And she'll survive this too. You think this man saved you?" he spat. "He's filth. Half-blooded, lawless filth. You've thrown your lot in with a savage." She didn't flinch. "He's done more with silence than you ever did with sermons." The first gunshot didn't come from her. It came from the tree line, wild and sudden. One of the father's men cried out, horse rearing. In that instant of chaos, everything broke. The mountain man dropped to one knee, sighted, fired, once, twice. Men scrambled, fired back. Her ears rang. She moved without thinking, ducking low, pressing against the slope. Mud splashed her face. The sky cracked open with thunder. When she rose, one of the men was down, bleeding into the grass. Another had fled. Her father still stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, unmoving. The mountain man approached slowly, gun lowered now. "This doesn't need more blood," he said. The old man sneered. "You think this is over? You think I don't know how to end the story?" She walked toward them, rifle slung across her back, boots sinking into the earth. She stepped between them. "I've ended it," she said. And then she did the one thing he never taught her. She turned her back on him. He called her name once. Just once. No command in it, only confusion, as if saying it might make her pause, might remind her. She didn't. They watched from the ridge as the remaining men left, the coffin bouncing behind the wagon, lid still shut. She stood in the rain until the sound of hooves vanished into distance. Then she let herself breathe. That night she went into labor. It came like the storm, fast, unforgiving. He didn't panic, just laid out the cloth, stoked the fire, knelt beside her, his hands trembling but steady. She screamed once, twice, then bit it back. She'd survived worse. She would survive this. When the child came, it was quiet at first. Then it wailed, a bright, strong cry that filled the cabin like light. She held it close, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her cheeks. The mountain man sat beside her, silent, watching. She didn't offer him the child. She didn't need to. He already belonged to it. "What's his name?" he asked softly. She looked down at the boy. His fists balled tight, his eyes like storm clouds. "A name from both sides," she said. "A name no one can bury." He nodded, didn't ask what it was. The next morning, the sun broke over the ridge, golden and soft, touching the cabin roof, the pines, the smoke trailing from the chimney. She stepped out into the light with the child in her arms. The earth smelled new. The past had not vanished, but it no longer weighed the same. She didn't belong to shame anymore, or silence, or him. She belonged to herself. And that, finally, was enough.